Oh, hello. I'm Meltdownboy, and today I want to talk to you about Superman. Specifically, I want to talk to you about where the hell did Kryptonite come from? I think it's common knowledge among people who are in the loop about Superman and sort of the origins of Superman, but even I didn't know like fully where Kryptonite came from, and it wasn't until doing this video, and also just when Superman came out, I just got so intensely attracted to the idea of like exploring what Superman was at the beginning, and so I listened to the Superman radio show. Kryptonite came from the radio show. A lot of people don't know that, but a lot of people just assume it was a thing that was in the comic books from the beginning. In terms of the entire history of Superman as a whole, it's been around for a very long time now. Yeah, it's wild how long Kryptonite has sort of remained the same in terms of concept of like a rock that makes him weak. By and large, it's a green rock. At some point in the comics, originally it was red, then it became green. They don't really say what color it is in the episodes I've listened to of the radio show. Before I get into the sort of like the story of Kryptonite in the radio show and what the original Kryptonite story was like, I want to give like a brief like beginning point of what the radio show is like, and some stories from the early episodes, and some other things, some interesting things of note between like the beginning and Kryptonite. So if you're just here to watch me talking about the original story of Kryptonite, go to this time code, but otherwise, thank you for staying. The radio show starts, much like any of the other movies start, Krypton and its destruction. In any of Superman mediums, like the Council of Krypton are always fucking idiots. Like I especially like in Zack Snyder's rendition, where they're just like aristocratic dumbasses that are like, "Ooh, look at us, we have a perfect civilization." Equally aristocratic idiots, and they don't believe that the sun is coming closer to the planet of Krypton, and then Krypton will explode, is what Jor-El tells them. And then so he goes off and he's like, "Oh, I've made this spacecraft for all three of us, but it's a prototype, so it's smaller, so it soon," because he thinks that the planet will destroy in like maybe a couple months. To him, he's like, "Oh, I've got plenty of time to make the next version." Then the planet obviously starts absolutely going to shit. So then he's like, "Oh, I have to send my son into this prototype spaceship." Sends him off, and then he goes to Earth. Now, an interesting thing of note in the radio show, he's already an adult when he gets to Earth, so none of the like Ma Kent, Pa Kent stuff ever happened. He just appears on Earth, saves a guy called Jimmy, no relation to the other guy called Jimmy, and then he meets Jimmy and I think maybe his dad or maybe his colleague, and like he saves them from like a tram crash, I suppose. And then Jimmy's like, "Oh, if you want to get close to the action and see what humans are like, you should go join a newspaper. That'll get you directly close to the action. Not like a policeman or a firefighter or the army. No. The news." And then he's like, "You need an inconspicuous name. How about Clark Kent?" And so he's like, "Oh yes, that's a great name." Then Clark Kent, or Superman now, immediately goes to the Daily Planet, goes to Perry White. Perry White gets a phone call from a bad guy, and then is like, "Oh no, there's a new story, bad guy." And then Clark's like, "Give me the job, I'll jump on the next plane and get you this story." And Perry's like, "What the hell, why not?" And then gives him the job, and he goes to this situation. So the bad guy had phoned up being like, hey, there's a train that's about to have not the train track being exploded, no, we're doing stuff different. We're exploding the hillside next to the train track so that rocks will fall onto the train track. Too many things being added to that. I don't see why you needed to have those extra steps, but okay. Superman he sees the crooks or the bad guys with the bomb and goes, you know what, instead of stopping the bad guys, I can see them over there. I'm going to turn into Clark Kent, go on the train. He's then going to get the attention of the conductor, and the conductor's going to be like, where's your ticket? Then Clark's like, oh, I don't have a ticket. The conductor then goes, do you have any money? And Clark's like, no. You know, you have to throw me off. Stop the train and throw me off now. The conductor's like, no, I'm not going to throw you off. You said you were a reporter. I'm not going to throw you off. You might write a bad story about me. And so Superman's like, oh damn, my weird plan didn't work. So then he just pulls the red cord to make the train stop. He sees the rocks fall down across the train track, and he goes and fixes the rocks as Superman and then leaves. But the whole time I was listening to this, I was like, this is Superman. This is Superman. He's faster than a moving bullet, stronger than a locomotive. He can leap across buildings in a single bound. Why is he using mind games to stop a train? I just thought it was so weird, but it's equally as charming. I want to stress that enough, that this radio show is really charming and really fascinatingly weird, and it's just because it's from a different time, and I would encourage you to watch this odd piece of Superman history. Moving on, then takes down the bad guy, but then the new bad guy who was above that bad guy, called the Yellow Mask, phones up being like, hey, I'm going to blow up the Daily Planet, and then puts Lois into a plane, kidnaps Lois, puts her into a plane. Then Superman stops the plane, and then catches Lois, and I think the Yellow Mask gets away or doesn't. It's not entirely sure. It's interesting that like Lois also like, from the sky you had a parachute, and she's like, no I didn't, but she's like, yeah, I saw a Superman. Absolute cinema. The Yellow Mask got away, and then multiple things ensue. Clark and Lois later on in the show track down the Yellow Mask to this abandoned warehouse. It really put it into perspective how dated the show is. By and large, there's not that many things that are like dated or like cringeworthy. There's even some interesting things, like when Lois first meets Clark, she fucking hates him. She's like, you managed to get that job by doing nothing. You're a crook. There's something off with you. And I really love that, Lois has always been this, like, strong woman and really being, like, and in a lot of ways, stronger than Superman in sort of character. So I've always loved that about Lois as a character. They're staking out this house, and Superman, in Clark form at this point, they're looking at it, and Lois sees, like, one of the henchmen or something, and goes, like, that's like a horrific shadowy monster over there. And I can quote this by hand. Superman, champion of the oppressed, says, no, Lois,
a tremendous big black man. He's
shocking. I had to like hold my mouth in. Again, it's from the 50s, I think. It's not good. It's not good. That was sort of the ideas at the time.
I just wanted to add in a little part here that a while after this representation of race in the radio show happens, there's a long-running part of the show that is fighting the KKK, which I think is a great improvement from the representation that they had. And yes, it's a step in the right direction. It's like an iconic part of Superman's history that he fought the KKK.
Let's get to the Kryptonite, but just one thing I want to mention. This like radio show is not really well maintained, and you'll see that more when we actually get into the Kryptonite story. There's stuff missing, there's like stuff out of order, there's no singular, from what I can tell from my research, there's no singular from start to finish Superman the radio show all complete in one go. So it's hard to track how far away I was from the ending of one podcast into another. The Kryptonite saga is called. The Meteorite from Krypton is the name of the 3-part saga that I listened to, which is the introduction of Kryptonite. It starts with Superman sitting in the Daily Planet, reading the paper, looking really unwell, and Perry and Lois come in, and they're like, "Are you feeling okay?" Perry explains that, like, Superman had looked at a story in the newspaper over his shoulder and, like, suddenly became, like, pale in the face, like, deathly looking ill, and ran off. And he goes, "Oh, I'm gonna go back to work." He actually goes home, and they're all like, "This is weird." Look at the newspaper that Clark saw, and it's a meteorite that also, like, the scientist who had died. They're like, "Oh, there must be some sort of connection. This is really strange." They said, Lois says this, by the way, which you'll see why this is important later. Lois goes, "Oh, the scientist said it was something like kryptonite. Why would Clark get ill from seeing or thinking about kryptonite?" And so they all rush to his house. There's an incredible moment where Superman at his home has, like, an inner, like, conversation with his inner monologue, and the way it's done reminds me a lot of, like, the Green Goblin talking to his mask, and I had a huge giggle about that when I was listening to this podcast. It is, again, this show is incredibly charming, but, like, fascinating to see how they try and push the way you can explain Superman's reasoning through, like, audio, because, again, it's going to be difficult since it's a radio show and only torn through audio. And then Perry and Lois come in, and they're like, "What's going on? Give us some answers straight. Why is there a connection between you and this meteorite?" And this is how it goes. He's like, "Oh, let me tell you the origins of Superman." And Lois goes, "How do you know the origins of Superman?" Clark's like, "Never mind that now, I'll explain later." Brother, you seem really suspect, quite frankly. Like, if they didn't know you were Superman before, probably do now. Anyway, so this is where the next episode that on this podcast, there must be some sort of gap in between, because there's so much stuff that's different. For one, there's suddenly a doctor inspecting Superman, trying to prick him with a needle, and naturally the, like, syringe or, like, breaks when it's trying to stab him in the finger. It leaves, and then Superman's like, "Oh, what's kryptonite? What's krypton? What's Krypton?" Sorry, I just said Krypton like I was Jarrell in the Reeves Superman. That's so funny. And then he's like, what? And I'm like, what's going on? Clark's whining, being like, no, I can't. Because obviously that would reveal that he's Superman if he keeps breaking this needle. The doctor suddenly has to leave because of another client or something. Leaves. Clark somehow goes to work, and they're all at work, and then Clark and Perry are talking again. Lois then storms into the room and is like, "I talked to a scientist," and I'm like, "Didn't the scientist die? Like, what happened?" This is why I think there's a gap in between these episodes. There has to be something. Or at least maybe this is a deleted alternate version. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, so then Lois goes, "I talked to the scientist, and when I heard what the name of this, like, metal was, it shocked me, and I nearly fell through the floor." And Clark's like, what is it called? And she's like, it was called kryptonite. And all of them, like, go, and it's so funny. It's really odd, because then they're like, "Clark, I heard you in your sleep, and you were saying Krypton over and over and over again, and the only people who knew what kryptonite or Krypton was were scientists. So how on earth could you know what Krypton or kryptonite is?" And that's sort of that's how the cliffhanger that they leave the first arc of Kryptonite at. It's wild to me how much, like, muddling around of this, like, story there is, and this, like, story of, like, Kryptonite and Superman trying to, like, battle against Kryptonite went on for years, and there's so much of it missing or out of order or not in the right order, and just had to, like, condense it down to what's widely considered the introduction to it. And you can go look at more the radio show after the meteor from Krypton, but that's sort of the opening to Kryptonite in the whole of Superman mythos. I went into this video thinking, oh, it'd be interesting to see. Maybe it'll be a very generic story. Maybe a bad guy like shoves kryptonite to his face and is like, take this, and then Superman would be like, no. And it'd be really generic like that, but it's fascinating to me that it's really not. It's more about Clark and his reaction to it, and how I think a fascinating idea to me, and I hope maybe they do it. It's kind of like how Superman of 2025 did it, where it's kind of like an allergic reaction, and I like the idea that Superman just seeing an image of kryptonite gets really like anxious, or gets like he gets like unwell just by thinking of kryptonite, and I really like that idea. That was really fun to see, but it's fascinating to me, just all the different weird ways this story curves, and and the weird like contrivances and things like that. It again, I've said it throughout this video, but this radio show is very charming, but this is comic book history, and I just want to educate you guys on sort of kryptonite and its origins. So if you want to look at this radio show, do so, but like, once again, it's a very charming show. There's one bit earlier on, Superman like thinks he's chasing after the bad guys, and then accidentally stops a police car instead, and they shoot at him, and he's like, ha ha, why are they trying to shoot me? And image of him looking really grandiose and powerful in that moment, but also like with a smile. And this portrayal of Superman, although really unsure of himself, and really he doesn't like being Superman, he wants to be secretive, like he doesn't want to be outwardly Superman, which is, to my surprise, I thought Superman had always sort of had this idea of being like, I will protect the people and I will be on the front news, not in like a vain way, but more of just like he's more like Batman in a lot of some of the ways he tries to hide his identity. It's fascinating to see like the history of these like comic books and these worlds that I love. You know, I love the new Superman, and I'm really excited to see Supergirl show my love of like this world, these characters, and Superman. One of the first movies I ever watched growing up was Christopher Reeve's Superman, so to make a video about Superman is kind of a thing that's, if you really think about it, a thing that's always been coming. So I always love the idea of kryptonite, and you know, the inventive way that James Gunn managed to put it in his movie was fascinating. So go back and see the first ever instance of kryptonite is fascinating, and I'm really glad that it's not simple. It's a really like weirdly specific angle to look at kryptonite from the personal level of how it affects him and his like origins to Krypton. But yeah, thank you very much for watching this video. If you like this, subscribe. I'd love to do more of these to look at like sort of the history of comic books. I also have some videos on the horror movies that have come out this year, so if you want to watch them, they're up there. I did a video on Death Stranding and 21 Pilots, and I really can't wait to see you guys in the next video. I hope you have a most triumphant day and you've learnt more about Superman. Thank you very much.